Welcome back, fellow time travelers. When last we met, my Macintosh SE was clean but left in an unbootable state. But I'm happy to announce that, after retensioning the springs on the floppy drives, I was able to restore one to working condition. The other one won't read disks still, and I'm not positive that it ever did, but for the moment we're back up and running. For part 2, we're going to start by doing some restoration on this Macintosh keyboard. I've had this one in storage since high school in the 90s, and it's time for it to shine. But first, we need to get it apart and clean it. The keycaps just pop off, and they have a rubber cap underneath that acts as a spring to hold the keys up. And after pulling off all the caps, we see the product of spending a decade as a keyboard in a high school. Pretty nasty, but not the worst that I've seen. I shook off the larger debris into a garbage bag and then started loosening the harder stuck-on stuff with a toothbrush. I don't need it to be perfect, I just want to get rid of anything that might interfere with key travel in the future. Next, the back is held on by 3 screws and some clips, so I removed the screws and then gently pried it apart. Then, on the inside, I just had to remove 3 more screws, and I was able to lift the electronics and put them aside until later. You can really see the difference between the color of the plastic on the inside and the yellowed outside. This is a prime candidate for some retro brighting. But first, this was the 26th workstation in a computer lab, and the number 26 has been written on it in permanent ink for the better part of 3 decades. But I sprayed it with some alcohol and started scrubbing, and to my surprise, it disappeared after just a few minutes of elbow grease. Then it was just a matter of cleaning the rest of the case and removing as many marks as I could. By this point it was getting pretty late, but I brought all the parts upstairs and gave them a warm soapy bath. Then I brought the parts back downstairs for the retro bright treatment. Like always, I placed the parts on some cling wrap, and then give them a light coating of developer cream. For the keys, I made sure to dip each of them in the developer cream to make sure they got a decent coating. Then it was time to drop them into my UV LED lined box for some de-yellowing. And the next day I can immediately tell that the top and bottom shells now match color-wise, so it looks like this was a success. And sure enough, the keys on the keyboard all match too. So after a quick rinse and dry, it's time to reassemble. It took me nearly 20 minutes, but for you guys, it's only 10 seconds. The keyboard looks so much better, but unfortunately it's missing a key, and that means the plunger is stuck in the pressed position. So I'm working on modeling a 3D printed replacement. But for now, I put a couple of drops of hot glue on the missing one, as well as the one I'm using to model the new one, to keep them in the unpressed position. Now, since I'm down a floppy drive, I ordered a device called the FloppyEmu from BigMessoWires.com. It's a device that can not only emulate a floppy drive and load multiple disk images, but it can also emulate a hard drive. This device comes with a case that is some assembly required, so I removed all the paper from the acrylic pieces, and then set about assembling it. I really like the look of this device, and hopefully it'll work as well as advertised. I plan to do a dedicated video on it in the future, but for now, it boots. This will make it a lot easier to get software on and off of these old Macs. And the included SD card comes with a collection of old software to try out on it, like PrintShop. This software lets you make greeting cards and banners, and was designed to print them all on an old dot matrix printer. So I decided to make a card celebrating the fact that my SE isn't dead. A version of Microsoft Word is included from the 1990s, and while it isn't my favorite keyboard to type on, using this machine as a word processor really reminds me how sharp and clear the display is, and how ahead of the time the UI felt. And the exact same thing can be said about Microsoft Excel. I remember labs full of these machines in high school, and everyone had a blast making them talk. Modern speech synthesizers may sound a lot more natural, but there's just something so charming about these early attempts.
Hello fellow time travelers, and welcome back. It's time to embrace our robot overlords.
And if you desperately needed to get PC software running on the Macintosh, you could in fact do that. In fact, I got Windows 2.0 running on Universal Soft PC. You just have to make sure you're not in a hurry. The fact that this works at all kind of amazes me. It's nothing I'll ever use, but I had to try it. And of course, there's a bunch of games as well. Missile Command is a decent enough port of the arcade game. You're defending cities from a never-ending onslaught of missiles. Click in front of the missiles as they come down and you fire a counter shot that'll take them out if they connect. And it can create chain reactions where one explosion triggers another and another. It's a lot of fun, although the SE does struggle to keep up as more missiles are spawned. There's also Mac-Man, a cute little Pac-Man clone with your Macintosh computer taking the spot of the protagonist. It plays pretty much as you'd expect. Zip around the maze and eat some dots, and use power pellets to eat the enemies and don't get eliminated. I tried out this golf game and it loads pretty slowly, but it's also pretty detailed. This is the first piece of software I've tried that feels like it's really hurt by the lack of colors on the display, but it still feels pretty decent for the time. Now, I wanted to include a Star Trek game in this review, but unfortunately, I couldn't find one that would run on it. The closest I got was Star Trek 25th Anniversary, which complains about the lack of color. I did, however, find the port of the Star Wars arcade game, and it is fantastic.
Good fog standing by.
It looks and feels pretty much exactly the way I remember the arcade game playing, and it even includes the voice clips from the movies. And finally, one of the most iconic games of the era, Prince of Persia. This game looks absolutely beautiful on this machine, and really showcases how good these older machines could be at producing music. If you've never tried Prince of Persia, you definitely should, and this is one of my favorite ways to play it. I ended up making a full 2GB virtual hard drive and installing System 6 on it, so now I've got plenty of space for just about anything I can throw at this machine. To make loading software easier, I also installed Mini VMac on my PC, which was able to boot off of my 2GB virtual drive. Then I can just drag disk images into it and copy the software into the virtual drive and just build up a nice little collection that way. Now it was time to turn my attention back to that missing key on the keyboard. My printed key isn't perfect, but it does fit the stem properly. Since it's not a key I'm going to use a lot, I'm going to go ahead and use some medium density foam in the place of the rubber membrane that would usually be underneath the key. And that should work just fine. Overall, I think this restoration went beautifully. I've been in contact with some people in the Macintosh community, and I think I'm pretty close to getting a replacement drive, or at least the parts I need to fix my broken drive to make the machine whole again. I love the look of these machines, and it's definitely earned a place of honor in my collection, and it'll be placed on display whenever it's not in use. But now that it's back up and running, and I have an easy way to get software onto it, what software and games would you recommend I try out? Let me know in the comments below. As always, thank you for watching until the end. And thank you to my Patreon supporters for helping make content like this possible. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for future content, and until next time, take care.